All right, we are live. Rick Mayo, welcome back to the Future of Fitness, my friend.
Eric, I'm so excited to be back. I can't believe it's been 2 years. I thought it was just yesterday. And you're like, yeah, last time you were on was May of 2021. I'm like, okay, we have a lot to talk about. So
We do.
thank you for having me back. First of all, that's always a good sign.
Mhm.
And yeah, man, love your podcast. I love what you're putting out there. Great value. And I'm honored to be here for real.
I appreciate that. I appreciate all that. And thank you for making the time today. I know you got a ton going on, and it has been a while. I was looking at, I think the release date of our last episode was May 24th of 2021, in case people want to go back
Jeez.
and check it out. And we had talked about how fitness is kind of working its way into the new wellness ecosystem, right? That was the
Yes.
focus of the conversation. And now, so much is taking place. Pandemic, out of the pandemic, financial situations, investors slowing their grind, all kinds of stuff has changed over the last 2 years. So let's keep it specifically to your world, Rick. Like what has changed over the last 2 years and 2 months?
Mostly for us, and this is a blessing, of course, is just a lot of growth. So I think in franchising there, like we would be considered an emerging franchise. At least we were. Certainly the last time that you and I talked 2 years ago, which is funny to me because we've been in business at that point for 30 years. So it's like emerging franchise. But I understand through the lens of a potential franchise investor or partner of ours, we're a new franchise, right? And so the tipping point for folks wanting to get on board seems to be around 20 open. And so we're at 26 open now, but sales have been very brisk lately. We awarded 20 licenses last month. So that's 20 different locations, is what that term means. And we're on pace to do something similar this month. So if you extrapolate that over 12 months, it's like 240 licenses sold in a year is obscene, right? That's really fast. So what we've been busy doing is sales are brisk. So it's our objective to get clubs open in a timely manner, right? From the signing to opening, and that includes a pre-sale and all the construction and real estate and everything. And then make sure that they're operationally efficient so that they can get good return on investment and help more people. So that's really what we've been busy doing. Sales have been brisk. So we're scaling our team and putting infrastructure in place. And we have this framework, Eric, already set. And that's always a concern for a fast growing franchise. Can you support us, right? And it's like, well, yes, we have a framework and we have triggers and tripwires of when we hire and fill in these positions. And we've just been following the play. And so far, it's been well received, and it's just getting better. Our processes are getting tweaked a little bit as we learn, and franchisees are happy. And yeah, all's great right now. We're certainly capable of screwing it up, but at least thus far, things are going really well. So it's been great. I mean, from our lens, honestly, like it's been amazing. The last 2 years have just been a blur of amazing activity, learning opportunities, and scaling, and giving opportunities to investors and hiring people on our team. And it's just been awesome, dude. I'm loving it. It's really hard, and I love it for that reason.
Yeah, that's funny. It's don't worry, Rick. There's plenty of time to screw this up. Like
Yeah.
it's
And if anybody that knows me, I'm sure they understand I'm fully capable of doing that. So like it's early innings, right? Everything looks great. Brace yourselves, right? I'm
right.
teasing. No, we're gonna keep this thing on the rails for sure.
Good, good. Yeah, and it's as we were discussing right before recording the people that you have coming in. I mean, you got people like Mark Fisher, you got people like Mike Orsi, right? And we've talked about this. I've had Mike and Mark on the podcast recently, and to get people who really know the industry. These aren't just people who have been operators for a little while. Like these are people who are considered thought leaders, and they know the numbers, they know the math, they know the opportunities, and they're getting on board with your franchise. I mean, speak to that. Like, what does that mean to you personally, as far as the confidence for the brand, and why do you attribute their belief in what you guys are doing at Alloy?
Yeah, I mean, look, the word that comes to mind immediately is I'm just honored. Like I really respect those guys and what they've built, and I know that I've learned from them personally. And they like Mark has a coaching group. Mike has a big coaching group. Mike, as an example, works with I think over 65 different franchises. So the fact that he would invest his personal um, funds and invest personally in Alloy when he has access to all of those other franchises is, I mean, it's a real honor. And I mean, it's a responsibility as well. So I don't take that lightly. Same thing with Mark. I mean, he's a very savvy guy. He's invested in different types of vehicles, but to invest in the same vertical that he's in, which is fitness, and invest in an Alloy, I don't know, man. There's probably not a better compliment that I could have or an honor than that. So we're going to bust our ass to make sure that we live up to that. But yeah, I mean, obviously, dude, it's like I don't even know what to say. I mean, I was a little taken back, but honored all the way around for high level guys, certainly thought leaders. If you had to ask why, which I think was in that question, I think it's
Really?
just the simplicity of the model. You know, they've said very complimentary things about us and trust and the fact that they know me. And like, I mean, this is one of those things where like I've been in business for 30 years and it's probably a cautionary tale for anyone who like, just don't burn bridges, like do what you say and show up as that right person and have some integrity because you just never know where you're going to be down the road. I didn't think when I met Mark and Mike 10, 12, 15 years ago, we were licensing. I didn't think we would end up in the franchise vehicle at that time. That wasn't really on the radar. And lo and behold, we have. And because of our relationships that we've held that time, we've got that inherent built in trust. And you've got these high level guys that are investing in our franchise. So again, probably why is they know us and they understand the business model. It's simple. They're savvy. So they see the same gap in the market that we do. And there's an opportunity here and they're jumping into that gap, which is awesome. But yeah, I think just trust and they like the gap that we're servicing would be the reasons.
What is that gap?
You know, I know it like every founder is like, oh, we're totally different, you know, and I mean, I always get this question like, what's your differentiator? And I'm always leery of being that founder that like just has these blinders on, like nobody does what we do, you know, it's all
Sure.
super dope. We do this, we do that. And you've heard those kind of things. And I'm always like, eh. But I will say that it's definitely a different model in the sense that you know, there's class-based concepts, which is what most boutique fitness franchising certainly is in. And then there's some one-on-one training franchises, but those, you know, maybe not a scale of a business model, a plethora of class-based that makes it hard to differentiate. We sit in this little sweet spot in the middle, you know, meaning we target the personal training avatar. We personal train people in this setting of up to 6, which gives us some of the benefits also of the sociability and the thing and the stickiness of like a group. And our avatars, you know, people 45 to 65 that are a little dinged up. And that's
Hmm.
not typically what you see in a class-based concept. It's typically around 30 years old, already fit, female leaning. Come try free class. If you can survive it, join us, right? And where we're doing a full-on induction, and we talked about this on our last podcast, like we try to sit in that seat of like a healthy advisor, if you will. So we're not
Hmm.
threatened by things like, you know, a lot of our customers have health club memberships. I think across all of Alloy locations, it's like 80 something percent have a membership somewhere else. And we're totally fine with that because we
Wow.
sit in the hub of that wheel and that might be a spoke. Like maybe they want to do a rowing class or cycle every now and then. But what the seat that we're in is they'll come to us and ask, should I do this based on my goals and my health? And that's a defensible position to be in with that customer avatar, right? So it's like, again, it's trust, right? It's like we've got this trust. We sit in this advisor seat, whether it's supplements, sleep, recovery, all the spokes in that wheel that you can imagine that keep someone healthy. And there's a lot more of them now, mental health, all those things, right? We kind of sit in the middle of that as this sort of health advisor position. It's very defensible. So I think that avatar, especially being underserved, and they have unique needs. If you're 55 and you played college football and you've had a knee replacement, you just can't go and run on a treadmill for 30 minutes. You can't. So where do you really go, right? Unless you're going to do one-on-one training, and we tend to be the default for individuals like that. So so far, man, it's been great. It's been well received in all the markets. Gyms aren't having a trouble getting customers and keeping them. So it's been good so far. So that's certainly a unique proposition. And then the low number, like we are healthy at 130, really good at 150 members. That's a relatively low number compared to like a group concept.
Yeah.
And as you can imagine, in that number, like you know everyone's name, you know their kids' names, and so it's a bit different. And that also makes it stickier because it's just more intimate, right? So yeah, I mean it's customer avatar. They pay a little more, 45 to 65 years old. They have more means, and that lends itself well to personal training. We got the right machine built to fill that gap. And then because it's a low number and we have these intimate relationships and they're sort of underserved, there's not as many places for them to go and shop against us. It just makes for a good retention model. So all those things put together, I think is really what, if we're honest, was what makes us different. Sometimes it's as simple as that. It's the business model, right? And sure, there's
Yeah.
tech and slick stuff and all that makes all this come to life. But at the end of the day, like what makes it irrelevant? It's like there's only 130 people in there and they're 45 to 65 years old and they have money. That's it.
Right.
I mean,
Well,
all right. It's
it's
like, okay, it's like that
yeah.
simple. Somebody's like, well, why can't I knock that off? I'm like, well, easier said than done. Again, simple, not easy, but it's that simple. It really is.
Yeah, I mean, I have, as I put more years on this planet, my admiration for simple just keeps getting better and
It's
bigger.
our fifth core
It's
value, and it's so hard. It's so hard
it's
to
so
keep things
hard.
simple. It's so hard.
Yeah, and it's that Dunbar number, right? I mean, I remember when I was operating
Yeah.
a group model, it was like, okay, I was personally happiest and most fulfilled at like that 130 to 150 mark, but I wasn't as profitable as I wanted to be. So I always had to push to 200, 250, right?
Right.
And then I was
And you lose
miserable.
it.
You lose it.
Well, and I don't even know if you
Yes.
remember this, but when we first launched, we had two models. We had something called a Stronger Two, which, and really, like, we have this, like, it's a very systematic, as franchising should be. So it's like we have a racking system, and it stores all the equipment that one coach can stand in front of this rack system in that space and train six people very effectively. So Stronger Two would simply be there's two racks, right? It's just two coaches in the room at the same time. But as you can imagine, if our model that we go with long term, which we have, is what we call Stronger One, which is just one coach on the floor with six people in the building. If you double that, then instead of 130, now you're at 260 up to 300 maybe as a really good model, but you lose it. Like, it's funny how, like, well, that's no big deal. You're just doubling your business, but you've seen it. You just spoke to it. Your churn picks up. You feel a little bit chaotic because you're not able to have those intimate relationships. And at a price point of like $300, $400, $500, people want that, right?
Mhm.
And to your point, if people don't know what Dunbar's number is, it's based on Robin Dunbar, who's a scientist. I don't even know what his title is. It's a really odd title of what it studies, what he studies. But essentially, it's just ancient civilizations, and he's trying to answer the question: how many people can you hold a cognitive relationship with outside of close friends and family? Turns out the number's 150, often referred to as Dunbar's number or the rule of 150. And it's true. And even the company Gore-Tex, I think, is the example I can think of. They took it to heart even internally. So if they had a department that got larger than 150 people, they would split it because they knew if people working together, they didn't have to wear name tags. They didn't say, what's the guy in accounting? I mean, they knew them. They played softball with them on the weekend, whatever those things were. And that led to much greater productivity, even at the expense of splitting a department like that. So I don't know, interesting, but I'm glad that you've heard of it, and we may have talked about it before, or something that you learned on your own. But it's a thing. Again, like, why does it work? It's 130 people. You know everyone's
Yeah.
names. You know their kids' names. You know what they did this weekend. They know the same about you. Our director, as an example, Eric, that runs our corporate club, his wife is pregnant. So they had a baby shower for the gym, and I think every single member showed up there at some point throughout the day, right? I mean, just overwhelming support because they know him. They know what like, they know if he's having a boy or a girl. They know the name of I mean, it's like, that's the level of intimacy. And of course, as you can imagine, it's not hard to understand why that would drive greater retention, right, in a model like that. And it just feels good. Like, even as you, as the owner or the director running that business, it's like, boy, that's my sweet spot. I can put my arms around this, right?
Yeah.
Just north of that, it gets a little hairy, right? It gets a little weird.
Yeah. Yeah, completely. It's so distinct right around that mark too. It's like every time I
Mm-hmm.
push past, and eventually I kind of swole up to 250 as far as members. I was miserable and I had to find ways to scale myself and systems. And then I'm like, you know what? I kind of came back down towards that number, focus on profitability, did more personal training, and things got better. I mean, everything got better. My employees, my clients, the community, everything. It's really a magical number. And I learned it, I think, back around circa 2013. It was a big conversation point in CrossFit gyms because people were always shooting for the vanity numbers, right? Like, how many members do you have? How big is your space? All these things, but no one was really talking about profitability. We're like, well, hey, if we can just get to this something about this Dunbar number, if we can just get to that and then be highly profitable, right? Like,
Right.
profit. What a weird way to look at business, right? Then
So
that's
funny,
how
man.
mature we were as gym owners. We could really make it work. One of the things I want to dive into with you, because I think it's so fascinating, and I've had I've seen some brands do it well. I've seen brands do it too early. I've seen some people still holding out as far as like, when is franchising a good idea for a brand, right? I'm sure there's a lot of ways to take a look at it. I'm sure there's a lot depends on the model, all kinds of things. But, I look at like, Brandon and Kirk at Metabolic, they waited 10 years, right, to start franchising after a couple corporate owned. They needed the right partner, and they finally went for it, and everything's going really well there. And obviously, you took the leap, just a few years ago from a licensing model, which was really interesting, and I'm sure quite profitable as well. So you've been doing this for a long time, right? You waited a long time to do it. So yeah, I'm gonna stop rambling on this, but what insights do you have if somebody's listening, they have a great concept, maybe it's one or two gyms are doing well, what signs do you look at?
Yeah, I think we had the distinct advantage of having licensed, and that put me on the board for some giant franchises. So I got
Mm-hmm.
an unfair advantage of taking a peek under the covers at how franchising works. So when we decided to move to franchising, again, the opportunity cost of moving away from a very profitable, great licensing business wasn't lost on me. So it was a big deal, right? It was like abandoning something that is doing seemingly really well and will continue to for the foreseeable future. So do we really want to leave that? And the answer was yes. But I think if you're thinking about franchising your concept, I would say do spend some time. I mean, it was 30 years ish before we even thought about going to franchising. I'm not saying you have to wait that long, but I think if you have a solid concept, if you don't understand like which markets you work best in, if you don't have your customer avatar nailed completely, right? Because that will affect real estate choices because it needs to be a target rich environment for your avatar, right? If you don't do that hard work, like, and you can't answer questions like, do we work better in a city center or in the suburbs? It's like, well, you need to know those questions, right? And then do you have all those processes put in place? And we had a lot of that in place already. And a lot of people ask why. And then this, maybe the second part of that question is, why didn't you do corporate stores, right? Because
Hmm.
our model, like AUV is just a term for average unit value, which means how much a studio makes in a year gross revenue, right? So it's always like, what are your AUVs? And our AUVs are relatively low top line, but it can be, and I have to say that because it's franchising, very profitable. So it kind of makes a better owner model because they're not too expensive to open, and if you do it right, it can have a very high profit percentage. So everyone's like, why didn't you do corporate? It's like, well, I love entrepreneurship. I teach it at a local college. I love fitness in my life's work. So it's like, man, I could put these two vehicles together. And it's like, I'm really passionate about taking this thing out as a package deal and giving investors the opportunity to either learn to become entrepreneurs or expand their entrepreneurial portfolio. And then we talked about earlier the trickle down effect of like offering a vehicle for coaches and personal trainers to become, you know, to make a career, if you will, out of fitness. So when I think about that, okay, and that was part of my goal. So it's like, well, what did we put together? Well, we have like an overreaching benefits package. So when we go into these markets and our vendor, goes in and starts looking for viable candidates, we're able to offer a great salary, some profit share if our partners choose to do that, full suite of benefits. I mean, it's a real career move. And so it trickles down from me giving the opportunity to the investor, who gives the opportunity to the manager, and then it trickles down to even the coaches, right? But I will tell you this: if you have a franchise, and that was a lot, but if you have a franchise and or a business that you're thinking about franchising, it's very expensive. And so this is the key. Where you'll run into trouble is if you're underfunded. So if you
Hmm.
don't have funding, and we're fortunate enough to have done well in the other parts of our business, so we don't have any VC money out of the gate or friends and family around or whatever, that's
Wow.
unique. I mean, typically you're starting out and you've got some funding partners, and then you're the operations person if you're the expert in the fitness space, right? And there's nothing wrong with that either. That will buy you speed, but you're going to need money. I would say probably conservatively $5 million before you're to spend through before you're even going to make any profit. And so there's a term that's called royalty sufficient, which means all of your expenses are covered not by the franchise fees, but by the royalties that you're collecting from your units, right? And it's that's a moving target depending on what your expense model looks like as you scale to support franchisees, what your AUVs are in each location, and you need to know what that number is, because that ramp from zero to royalty sufficient is not just sales, it's getting them open, it's having a healthy pre-sale, getting them profitable. And so there's a lot that goes into it. And if you can't cover that gap, which is what happens at times, you just sort of run out of steam. And I've seen that, especially in the
Hmm.
fitness space, right? Where you have a concept that's pretty cool. Maybe it's not that differentiated. You're like, well, I have a boot camp style, but we do it this way. It's like, yeah, but the other one, is owned by a overreaching brand who can market like crazy. It looks similar through the lens of the consumer. You may think it's different, but I'm a Joe Schmo. It's like 20 people getting sweaty. Check, right? Got my workout in today. So I think you need to be well differentiated. You need to understand your market really well, have everything put together, and then you need money. And, like, it's not always the best option for most people. Here's some stats, not to scare everyone off, but only 15% of any kind of franchise, food, fitness, roofing, you name it, only 15% ever get more than 50 units open. Only 2% ever get more than 100 units open. So if you weren't a brick and mortar, you would imagine like, okay, that would be like a territory for like a pest control or something. That's all franchises. So you think, all you hear is like, oh, these franchises have thousands of locations. They are in rare air at that point in time. It's very difficult to get them open. And most people fail in that tranche, that hockey stick. They hit that low curve and they just can't fund that growth to get royalty sufficient. So I hope everybody gets into it. Like, I think the more good franchisees that are out there, the better it makes us look. But you better have your market nailed. There better be a gap there, right, where you can differentiate yourself. Think to the investor mainly, like, does this speak to these folks? Do they see it and be like, that's different, right? That's what we have done, and it really does help. And then, boy, you better have some money. And that's all I would say. Like, don't think you're going to get into it and start making money right away, because it's going to take several years, and you're going to be losing your ass until that point. So if you can withstand that, and you think you can get into that 15 or 2%, go for it. But it's 2% for a reason, right? It's a long shot to get there. So be realistic, because you could get into it, sink lots of time and money into it, and not be, you might be in the 98%. I think it's realistic to think that you could fall into the largest percentage of 98%. And if you do, can you mitigate that, right? Can you live with that? I know it sounds really
And it's
negative,
like,
but those are the facts.
yeah, it's just the hard truth. And I mean, you look at even just to be a successful single location small business, the numbers, are stacked against you, right? To make it 5 years, I can't remember, but everyone's got a different statistic that they throw around with,
But
launching
it's
a small
low.
business
You're
and
right.
success. It's low, and I think it's critical for people to understand too, is like the difference between selling territories and licenses and actually opening
Oh
successfully,
yeah.
right?
Like, if we
I mean,
sell
there's so
6
much that goes in
licenses,
between.
there's probably a 4-year development schedule for that, right?
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. It's big. And, there's a lot going on right now, and I want to get your take on the state of, and we're in, just people know, we're in Q3 of 2023 as we record, but, I've heard a lot of numbers about health clubs doing great, right? The kind of bigger chains and franchises. I haven't talked a lot about the health of boutique, specifically. So, and we've heard a lot of news this year, especially the publicly held companies of, F45 and Exponential Fitness, a lot of, circulating news around those brands, some good, mostly not so great. So when you look at overall, we can sort of kind of high level, how is the state of boutique fitness in 2023 post pandemic?
Yeah, I think when you look at most of the class-based concepts, they're still a little off, even the well-established ones. So if you look at Orange Theory, from what I understand, they're still about 20% off brand wide from where they were, pre-COVID. So you could say, well, is that like a COVID thing? I don't think so. I think what COVID did is you and I have talked about, just accelerated a lot of things, right? And so I think you look at maybe something that's class-based, that's based on a modality or a piece of technology, and they just run their course. They just do, right? And so I think perhaps some of those class-based concepts, even in theory, have sort of run their course. And so we're starting to see that now come to fruition. The popular franchises now are more like, again, it's experiential and it's personal service, right? And that lends itself to like what we do. You see a lot of recovery franchises now, based on cold plunge and sauna and those type of things are becoming really popular as well. So I think the state of boutique fitness is still strong. I just think within boutique fitness, at either end of the spectrum, I think we're seeing some challenges for the brands that are based on single modalities and or a piece of technology.
Why do you think that is? I mean, the single modality, maybe you could define that a little bit more in your interpretation. Like what would you consider a single modality and why do you
Yeah.
think that's challenging right now?
Like if you're a spinning concept and you just do
Hmm.
cycling, right? I think, say we've been in business 30 years. I've seen spinning come and go in popularity probably 4 times, right? In that time period. Rowing, like you just rowing, right? And I think those things just have a lifespan. Like they're hot and popular when they come out, but eventually when they reach a certain maturation rate, it's like I think people have tried it. It's not something that you want to do forever. I don't know a lot of people that are going to row 3 days a week for 3 years, right? It's just something that you do for a minute. Again, and they're not able to sit in that seat of like that hub that we talked about earlier, where like you're the health advisor and you can manage all these other spokes in this wheel. You're just one of the spokes, right? And you're probably one piece of one of the spokes because you're just the cardio workout, if you will, right? There's a lot of other people that fit into that. So I think there's just a plethora of them in market. And I think when they go out of style, if you will, or they lose flavor for a minute, it puts a hurting on their brand. And so, we often address that with our brand. It's like, well, is this a trend? I'm like, no, we've been doing this since 1992. Now, the way we service it and the technology behind it, and that will continue to evolve, but it's not at the expense of the brand promise, which is simply accountability and specificity. Brand promise isn't EMS technology or heart rate or things that can be disproven or fall out of favor, or a piece of machinery that people just don't want to do forever. So you got to be careful with those things. I think we're seeing a little bit of that just based on the plethora of those. And again, I'm speaking at this through the consumer's lens. They all look kind of the same, right? And to your point, large health clubs, like a lot of what we did in licensing was build things for large health club brands inside of their 4 walls that would compete with those other things. Because if your whole shtick is like we row, we run, and we do some light weights, as an example, it's like I can recreate that in a room in my giant health club. I don't know if I can create the same experience as a studio, probably not, but I can charge a lot less, right? So I can create something similar. And if I'm in a $29 a month gym for $75 all in, I can probably offer this thing and have unlimited usage of these classes, right? And that keeps that 300 or 400 people in their facility that would normally be leaving to go consume that at, say, an Orange Theory or something. And they're like, well, why would I do that when it's right in the same 4 walls of my gym? And so I think those guys have gotten more savvy at creating a customer experience, a business within a business, and that chips away at some of those class-based concepts as well. So that could be contributing. And to your point, like everybody that we know that's in the large club space is absolutely crushing, right? Whereas the sort of class-based fitness concepts coming out of COVID have not really picked up. Even in those larger areas, Eric, when I talk to the franchise or the licensee, sorry, that we have worked with in that big space, they'll say that their group training stuff is still not up to par, but their personal training is through the roof, right? So it's a good sign overall, trend wise, that right now, anyway, people are looking for experiential something and they'll pay for it, right? And they want that specificity and accountability that they can't get in a group setting. So even in the health club realm, the group, team training or boot camp stuff is not selling as well as personal training is. So it's just interesting. So that's what we're observing right now. I can't hear you.
Rookie mistake, Eric.
There you
Yeah,
go.
that's all interesting. And one of the things I want to touch on and circle back on is that the concept of brand promise. I saw something, a piece of content. I think it was you and Mike Arcee did it, and that's believe it or not, it's like the first time I've heard those 2 words put together in a kind of a package, and then obviously very well thought out journey that you took to get to a brand promise. So maybe you can expand for us a little bit, like what is a brand promise? What is the brand promise of Alloy, and why is that so darn important?
Yeah, I think, look, we left the name personal training in the title for a reason. And there's not a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people, certainly, that you'll run into in the avatar and the areas that we're going into that haven't heard of a personal trainer or don't know what they do, right? It used to not be that way in 92. It's like, what is it? What do you even do? But now everyone's heard of what a personal trainer does, right? Well, with that, though, comes anchors for both pricing, and that helps us because we're able to offer a good value there because we train people in a small group setting, and or service, right? So like pricing and service anchors go with that. Well, just in the simplest form, Alloy personal training. Okay, so what happens behind that brand? It better be personal training, right? It better be very specific to the individual. And
Right.
believe me, the branding starts with the marketing that you put out, and it ends 4 years later, or 3 years is our average stay of a customer, right? When they move or whatever that is, you have to meet that brand promise all the way through. So branding is this really comprehensive, sort of overreaching dome of things, if you will. And it starts with like, who are we speaking to? And real estate choice. Okay, what's our marketing look like? What's the experience of the customer getting through that marketing funnel to become a member? What does the induction look like? Is it come try a free workout? Because that's maybe more class based, or you do a real sit down with someone and show them tools that look smart and scientific and specific to them, right? All of that. And then do you back it up? Like if you make these brand promises about what you're going to do and you've got personal training on the door, are you really personal training people, or do people get homework for things to do on their own outside of the gym? Are they being held accountable to those things, right? Do you know their name? Do you know what to ask them from an accountability standpoint, when they're coming in? Are you looking after them if they don't show up? Are you reaching out to them and saying, hey, where were you today? That may not be happening in the class-based concepts, right? So I think brand, you can explain it. You could be Starbucks and have a brand that means nothing about coffee until it does, right? Or you can put whatever you do right on the front door, and then you have to meet that brand promise. And we're just thankful that like personal training is very easy to understand. It's again the elevator pitch. Eric, what do you do? Well, you wouldn't say this, but like I own a studio concept. Oh, really? You mean like, Bill's boot camp? No, they do classes. We do personal training. And people go, oh, okay. Again, what comes with that though? Pricing and service anchors that they're going to have an expectation around. You better meet that expectation, right? So to me, branding is everything. But if you're going to go forth with a brand that promises something, you better think about it from the very first customer interaction until, again, our average stay is 3 years later.
Yeah, I think you froze there for a second. The so maybe I missed it in there, Rick, but specifically, like, what is the brand promise of Alloy Personal Training? Like, I want, like, how do you present that?
Yeah. So again, it makes it easy because it says personal training, and people have again, pricing and service anchor that goes with that. But literally, like as it's written, our brand promise to our customer is looking good, which is a relative term. But I think most people at least
Mm-hmm.
have a secondary goal. When you peel the onion, you get down to more whys with people, and that's where you're really cooking with oil. But when it starts out, it's like, I
Yeah,
need to lose weight. Okay, good. Like you want to look good. Like who doesn't want to look good? Got it. But it's looking good
100%.
on, yeah. And it's like, that's on purpose. That's probably the least important thing. And I say that because like it becomes being fit is about so much more, right? So looking good, and if you're 300 pounds and you get down to 250, are you looking good? Yeah, you're looking good, right? You're not ready for a bikini contest, but who cares? In your mind, you look good. Check. Next one, feeling great. And great's important there. It's not looking great, but you could argue that if you feel good or you look good, then you feel great. But also like the way you move. Like when you're looking at an avatar of 45 to 65, these are people with means. They feel like they're young at heart. They still want to get out and do the things that they enjoy, whether it's go to Scotland and golf 36 holes with their buddies, or back-to-back days hiking in the Alps with their family, or whatever those things are, right? And they need to be able to do that somewhat pain-free and be able to do it. So it's like, okay, good. So feeling great. So we have like ways to measure how people move and tangibly over time. And that's a big part of it because people come to us and we're not fixing pain. We're not physical therapists, but we will be able to work around it and get you to a better place for sure. Right. And then, so looking good, feeling great. And lastly is living life to the fullest. And if you read any of our success stories, Eric, it starts out with like almost an afterthought, like, yeah, I lost 25 pounds, blah, blah, blah. But, and they just go on to write these long, well thought out descriptions of how their life is better. And that's the coolest thing to me is like, what is the things we're doing in the gym? How does it cross over? And it could be as simple as like, I'm 70 years old and my husband and I painted our deck this weekend and we weren't even tired or sore. Or I got up off the floor by myself, which I've never been able to do. Or it could be on the younger, fitter end of that. Like we have a guy who his son is like some really, fit bow hunter, right? And he like goes to these backcountry, and I've never bow hunted elk, but from what I understand, you're hiking 12, 15 miles in the backcountry. It's really hard. and he'd never been able to do it. And he wanted to do these trips with his son, this is his passion. And he finally got in shape. So he's like, yeah, I lost 40 pounds, but, and then it just goes on about how he felt to be out there with his son, and he never could have done it before. And that's the living life to the fullest. How long can you continue to do the things that you're passionate about in your life that keep you active, right? So I think that's the brand promise. Like, I think everyone understands that personal training can help you lose weight. Check. Can they make you feel better? Yes. You're going to be able to move better. You can tie your shoes without grunting, maybe, like all those things. Check. And then, are you going to be a better mom, spouse, father, child, whatever you are to the people in your life, boss, coworker, whatever that is? You're going to be a better version of that if fitness is part of your lifestyle, period. Your brain's going to work better, body's going to work better. You're just supercharging your entire system, right? So that's our brand promise at the end of the day. And I feel like, honestly, that personal training encompasses that. I think people would, if I explain that to them again, they'd be like, oh yeah, like I believe that you can do that for me, right? That's it. And you're just making happier, healthier people with better self-esteem, and they can just approach the world as a completely different individual, like a better version of themselves. That's it. That's all we're trying to do at the end of the day. And I think personal training alone does that. I really do.
As someone who just recently entered your target demographic, like that speaks to me. Like it truly does.
Team,
like I'm like, yeah, I'm like that gets me motivated, inspired, right? Like, yeah, that's what I want. That's exactly what I want. And I could tell, it's been probably 30 years for you to come down to that simple brand promise, but it speaks very directly to what I want. Is I want to look good, man. I want to feel good. And I definitely want to live life to the fullest, because I think you get to a certain point, you're like, oh, wow, like I'm over the halfway point statistically. Like I better get a move on and get all those things done that I want to do. And you finally have the means, right, that maybe you didn't have in your 20s. And you got to get to it. So it's I could tell a lot of thought went into that, as simple as it may sound, those, simple is complicated at times. I want to talk to you about the personal training industry.
It's a loaded question. You could go any way, but I think, again, to keep it simple, like that's it. It's that simple at the end of the day. And then everything you do has to back that brand promise up, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Personal training, obviously that's the world you live in. Right. And I'm going to set a table for this, because the conversations come up a couple times, either personally or on this podcast, about like, what is the state of the personal training industry? Is it slipping into the gig economy, right? Where it's like, you have some people want to just, I just want to get my certification, do personal training this summer, or I'm also going to do personal training at this health club, but then I want to have my Instagram following, and I want to sell affiliates, and I want to do some online. I want to do, all these things. And, I was at IDEA this summer, and the turnout was, not quite to expectations, put it that way. And sure. I think there is, some chatter like, well, what does that mean, right? What does that mean for education? What does that mean for the career? So when you look at the personal training industry, like, is it a career path? Is it slipping into the gig economy? Is it evolving to something new? Like, what's your take on that profession?
I think so. I think, the few verticals that you just rattled off are all viable options, right? If you look amazing and you have a great knack for posting compelling and engaging social media, you could probably be a really good online coach, right? You can work in different health clubs. You could bounce around. You could do both. I don't think it's changed in the sense that there's still opportunities for individuals, and there's different verticals now with obviously social media and all the technology that we have to be very successful. Also, like if you have brands like ours, like again, one of the things I'm really proud of is giving a vehicle for individuals to make a career out of this, where you can make a 6-figure income, you can get your arms around 130 people, right? I'm talking about as like a manager, not even as an investor. And you get to do fitness, right? Like you're not just typically the ascension for a personal trainer is you become a personal training manager, which Eric, you and I know that means you're just selling personal training. You're just sales all day, every day, right? So it's like, okay, no, you're like, our churn is relatively low. So you get to just do fitness. So can you get your arms around 130 people? And, benefits and all the great things that come with a career in fitness. And I think it's a little bit like being a teacher or maybe a high school coach, where yes, there is somewhat of a ceiling, right? But if you're really passionate about it, and you think you could get to a 6-figure income, and not kill yourself getting there, and you have balance in your life, and you can tangibly put your hands on the lives of the people that you're touching, that's a pretty compelling offer. So I think there's still opportunities like that out there for coaches. I would just caution you against maybe what things look like from the outside for maybe, again, influencers, and you're pimping protein powders and all that. I think all that's great. I'm not sure that that's as viable as a career as it looks. And if you attempt it and it's not an indictment on you. There's probably a little more smoke and mirrors around that than you think. So I would say a strong base of a brick and mortar concept to back you, and then dabble in the other things is probably the way to go. But it's still there. There's still careers to be had. And if you love it, man, there's nothing better in the world that you can go home and put your pillow on at night and say, I'm changing lives, and tangibly see it day over day. It's not hard to understand how that's working, right? And that's really powerful.
It's funny to me, and I never fact check this, and I can't remember the statistic, but basically, to summarize, it was like in 2022, the fastest growing job or career in people under the age of 30 was influencer. And I was like, what?
Is that a job?
WTF is going on? Like, what does that even mean?
Well, I think a lot of people want to do that, but is that like a real job? I mean, look, I'm saying real money, but I mean, if you're making a couple grand a month, right? That's great as long as you're living with your parents. But I think if you want to like make a career out of this, you could do a little bit of both. You can do some brick and mortar work, and I think it brings you some legitimacy if you work with like real tangible people that are in front of you that you can touch and talk to. And people will train stars and famous people. That's a career path. I mean, I did that early on. Went on tour with Madonna, trained Usher. It's like, sure, you could do that. If you're into it and you like the persona of that, you could train. There's a lot of older people with money. You could go work at a country club and train there and train golfers. I mean, there's so many cool career paths that you could take and still be a coach. You just have to understand that at some point, if you say, I want to make $1 million a year, you're not going to be able to do that trading your time for money, right? And that's absolutely okay. Not everyone's built to be entrepreneurs and take all this risk, and certainly financial risk. And if you're not, great. If you love coaching, own it, right? And go find the best environment for you to change lives, that you get what you deserve and pay, and that you can actually make a living doing it. And there are opportunities out there. So I think in these disruptions like COVID, coming out of COVID, I know that I speak on the Perform Better circuit as well, and they were off a little bit this year as well. But I think it just disrupt everything, So some people like left that career. You may see more of an influx coming in the next few years, but I think it's a natural disruption. I don't know that I think it's a bit too early to look at like the first live summit for IDEA as an example being a little bit off. It's like, well, of course, there's just been massive disruption. People left. Maybe not enough people have come on board. So I think we're still going to see that as a viable career choice in the future.
Yeah. Interesting. I know we're buttoning up on time here, but one of the things I want to talk about, because you mentioned tech, you had mentioned innovation, but where do you see innovation currently taking place within the personal training space?
Yeah, I think you mentioned it earlier. Like a lot of the online engagement is getting much more compelling. You've got a little bit of AI baked in there, but like there's a real viable option for training people remotely. It's just whether or not the people you're training want that, right? I think it's just a subset of the population. Most people want to be held accountable. They want to show up, put their keys down, and there's a warm body. There's Eric's waiting for me, and he's like, "Hey, man, how was your weekend?" That feels more visceral, and I think the technology that we're seeing for personal training, the ones that are doing it well, it's enhancing the human to human experience, not replacing it. I just don't think we're there yet, nice. Right? I think people still crave people to people contact. And we talked about like fitness being experiential, and that be where the trends are going, but that means human experiential, right? And so any kind of AI or tech, just try to look at it through the lens of like, is this increasing our connectivity to other people? Because that's what people crave. Or is it replacing it? Because we're just not there yet. And I mean, maybe AI gets that good. I'm sure that it will at some point, but at least for the foreseeable future, all the tech that I see, it's really good. And most of the better tech pieces they're bringing down friction to get to the thing, whatever it is, easier, right? Simpler, again, simple. And then it's also enhancing that human to human contact by any means necessary, whatever that is.
I think we're going to look back on this 5 years from now, in this specific time that we're in, Rick, and be like, wow, like everything is happening so fast right now. The rate of innovation in all spaces is just crazy fast, and it's only going to get faster. And I think our lives are going to be completely different in 5 years. I have no idea whether that's good or bad. I tend to be optimistic. But sometimes you have to concern yourself a little bit. Can we handle all this change?
Yeah.
I
Well,
guess
I think we're
pulling
going to
yourself.
crave you're craving a pullback to that human to human experience, right? I don't think we're ready for full AI, and we still have these lizard monkey brains. It's like we're like, it's like, and we're scared of all this tech. It's like, well, the horse is out of the barn now. We're not going to get it back. But I think the plasticity of the way that we think, it's different. Like, it's not like, oh, this AI piece can replace these coaches, and this is the business model. And I talked to a good friend of mine, Brian O'Rourke, who was on my podcast last week, and he's like, that's
Mhm.
the framework we used coming out of World War II, right? And we still got those people around. It's like, you do this, you go with efficiency, it's like, and that's not the same linear approach that you're going to need moving forward. You're going to need to think a little bit differently than that, right? And if you think experiential, and how does it fit into that paradigm? It's completely different than like tech replaces truck drivers, which, saves us money and shaves 4% off of it. Like, okay, but that's not going to do it. That type of thinking is not going to work in this environment. I think right now we're in this weird stage where you've got that type of thinking, but you've got this new technology that's going to take a completely different mindset and brain power to really understand how to use it right in a relevant way. And to your point, I think like right now we're just sort of in this like, we're freaking out, and then we're also excited. It's like, I don't know where it's headed, but I don't think we're to the point yet where it can replace everything. And the fatalistic approach of like, again, Terminator, right, where machines become sentient and shut us down and kill us, maybe, but I don't think so, man. I think I still have full faith in human beings and mankind. And I think that we will build technology in a way that will just enhance the human experience. That's what I'm hoping for anyway.
Yeah. Well, I like that. I'll jump on that bandwagon. Rick, last
Thank
question
you.
for you, and always always like to finish up with this one. But how can we help you as a community, as an industry? What do you need help with right now? What should people reach out to you for?
Thanks. I mean, yeah, just support. Like, I'm all in on franchising. I'm singularly focused right now. It's very powerful to do so. We talked to pre-podcast, haven't always done that. So it's really
Yeah.
nice to just have all my eggs in one and energy in one basket. So look, if you need any help with anything, just alloyfranchise.com, reach out, even if you just want to kick around ideas. I love the industry overall. And while I don't do consulting or things like that any longer, I'm still happy to answer questions and help any way that I can. But just support us. If you like what we're doing, follow our stuff, give us a like, give us a shout out. If you know somebody's interested in fitness franchising, send them our way and we'll take care of them. Other than that, man, just keep doing what you do, Eric. We appreciate you, man.
Yeah, likewise, Rick. I've always admired the work and the content and the consistency that I've known of you since my time having talked to you, and it's always a pleasure, man. Your insights are awesome. Really enjoy our conversations, and more than anything, I really enjoy our conversations when we're not recording. I always glean some value from it in my career. So thank you for all that, and ladies and gentlemen, Rick Mayo.
Thanks, guys.